Konnichiwa, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to my Japanese Faves series where we'll cover every major type of Japanese food. Today's lesson is the truth about wasabi. Now you can also take my cooking course, which is called Learning to Cook Like a Pro, One Small Plate at a Time. It's 104 lessons. They start off easy, they get more difficult, then they get really difficult. Then it ends with the ultimate challenge, which is actually 5 lessons in one. You can also watch some of my other series, which are Italian Faves, French Faves, including my Julia Plus segments in my French Faves series, where I take Julia Child's recipes and add my plus to them. I also have an Impress Your Date series, Sauces to Die For, Spain on a Small Plate, Smoked Stuff, and bonus lessons, like how to break down a chicken. But today's lesson is about wasabi. Now, this is a photo of the wasabi root. Okay, this is what wasabi really looks like in the wild. Okay, it's a root, and you've probably never had real wasabi. I'll say it again. You've probably never had real wasabi. Finding real wasabi in the United States is difficult. It's usually only in very expensive restaurants, and often restaurants will charge you extra for real wasabi if they even have it. Okay, but most don't. Okay. Now, to understand why you've probably never had it, you need to understand how it grows. Now, wasabi grows native in Japan. It also grows native in the far east of Russia, and also grows native in the Korean peninsula. And when I say native, I mean it just grows naturally without it being cultivated. It is not native to North America, okay? And its environment is very particular. We'll talk about it more as we go on, but it's stream beds in mountain river valleys, and with flowing water. So it's a stream, you have to have kind of a babbling brook type of a thing. Now the bad news about growing wasabi, if you were to try to grow it yourself, is that it's very hard to cultivate, okay? It needs shade. It cannot handle sunlight. It needs a cool temperature between about 46 degrees and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It prefers high humidity, and Japan has that. It needs to be partially submerged in running water. And it's also very slow growing. It can take about 3 years for a plant to reach maturity. It's also very sensitive while it's growing. It's prone to disease. Its leaves are delicate, and any breakage of the leaves or the stem can slow the growth or even kill the plant. And small changes, and I've mentioned what the ideal growing conditions are. It has to have shade, it has to have a certain cool temperature, babbling brook, right? Even small changes in the ideal growing conditions can kill it. Now there is a little bit of good news. It's a perennial, so if you manage to get it to grow and you have it healthy, right, then it's going to come back year after year because it's perennial. There are some wasabi plants that have been growing for hundreds of years, and it is now artificially cultivated in Japan, and they have a pretty big business in it actually. It's also being artificially cultivated in the United States and also elsewhere in the world. But the bottom line is that wasabi is very hard to grow. It's very hard to grow enough of it economically to satisfy the world's wasabi habit. Okay, you go to a sushi restaurant and they give you a little lump of wasabi. That's not really wasabi. We'll talk about that more as we go on. But you get a little lump of it, and a lot of times you'll say, "Can I have more wasabi and the ginger, the pickled ginger?" And they bring you over another big lump of it. That is not going to happen if it's real wasabi. Or if it is, they're going to charge you for it, okay? So that makes real wasabi very expensive. And outside Japan, real wasabi is pretty rare. I've seen it in restaurants in the United States a couple of times. They usually charge extra for it. I'm fine with that. Don't always pay to get the extra. Don't always pay extra to get the real wasabi, but I'm okay with them charging more for it. In Japan, the faux wasabi is also very common because, again, it's very expensive to grow, and if depending on what your business model is for your restaurant. If you're not high end and you want to serve sushi economically, then you're probably going to use faux wasabi, because you want to. If you're going to buy real wasabi and you're going to serve it, you either have to eat the cost of it, or you have to pass that cost along to your customers. You may not want to do that. So, and as I said, it's hard to grow economically to satisfy the demand. So there just may not be enough of it either at a reasonable price. So in Japan, faux wasabi, which we'll talk about more, is very common. Now, wasabi has been used in food since about the 700s, okay, in Japan. But in the United States, we didn't really see it until the 1980s. The 1980s were when sushi started to become popular, started to appear on the scene in the United States. And then people found out what wasabi was. I mean, I never heard about wasabi until sometime in the 80s. And so even though it's been used in food since the 700s in Japan, 1980s in the United States. Now, let's talk about the taste of wasabi. Real wasabi. Real wasabi tastes more like hot mustard or horseradish, not chili peppers. Okay, so when we're talking about the heat of it, it's more like a mustard type of sensation. Not a mustard taste, but more of a sensation rather than chili peppers, because it stimulates the nose more than it stimulates the tongue. And it's best understood, it's easiest to understand real wasabi by comparing it to faux wasabi. Now, here's a big lump of faux wasabi. This is the type of thing you would get in a sushi restaurant in the United States. It's a paste, basically. You can see it's a paste. Because of the difficulty of mass cultivation, as I said, the price is very high. There's limited availability. And so we use a substitute in the United States and most of the world, and including Japan, which is called Western wasabi. All right? It's not really wasabi. They just call it Western wasabi. And that is usually mixture of horseradish and sometimes mustard, sometimes green food coloring, sometimes things like spinach. I've also seen spirulina, and maybe a thickener like cornstarch or flour. And most wasabi that you get in restaurants has no wasabi in it. And most wasabi that you might buy, say in a supermarket, for example, if they have it, has no wasabi in it. I have one here. Let's see. This says all natural powdered sushi wasabi, right? But if you look at the ingredients are horseradish, spirulina, like I mentioned before. I'm not even sure what that is, and turmeric. That's it. That's what's in here. And that or similar ingredients is what is in almost all wasabi that you get in almost all Japanese restaurants or any place that serves sushi. No wasabi at all. Now, how is real wasabi used? Like I said, it's a root. It's about 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch in diameter. You know, kind of like the diameter of a big carrot, and it gets grated. And it gets graded to order. If a restaurant is using real wasabi, they are grading it to order. They're probably not grading it in advance and making a big bowl of it. If they do, I can't imagine why they would do that, because they have to be charging a lot of money. And if they're charging a lot of money, they're probably not going to do that. They're going to grade it to order. Okay, so in a restaurant, if you're getting real wasabi, it's probably being graded to order, unless they are mixing it up from real wasabi powder or from or if it's a graded in a tube, which they can be doing that too. And that's still better than the faux wasabi, but it's not as good as the freshly grated wasabi. Now, to grate it, traditionally you use a grater like this. This is shark skin, okay? And sometimes it's double-sided. Mine actually isn't double-sided. Sometimes it's coarse shark skin on one side and finer shark skin on the other side. And that is the best kind of grater to use for wasabi. Another kind of grater is the Oroshigane. And that has these little metal teeth on it. They are coarse on one side and they're finer on the other. I hate using this. Why? Two reasons. One, when it grates the wasabi, it gets stuck in these little teeth, right? So if you're grating real wasabi, you don't want to waste any of it, right? And so you don't want any of it to get stuck in these metal teeth. The other reason is if your fingers get onto these spines on this grater, you will be grating yourself into your wasabi. Okay, so I do not like to use this this Oroshigane. I use shark skin grater, but truth be told, I hardly ever use fresh wasabi made from the root because it's too perishable, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we go on. If I use it at all, I usually use it from a tube, or I might mix it from powder of real wasabi. But when you do use this to grate it, make sure on the camera. You take the wasabi in your hand and you do it in a you grate it in a circular pattern, okay, and then catch it in a bowl underneath. And then you can use like a little brush to brush off any that's left behind on the grater, okay? Now, the flavor of freshly grated wasabi, it diminishes, it kind of goes away after about 15 minutes when it's exposed to air. Okay, so if you grate it, that's another reason why it's graded to order, because if you grate it in advance, it's going to lose its pungency, its flavor, unless it's covered. And you know, you're not going to want to do that. It's still going to get exposed to air, so it's going to lose some of its freshness. So you're going to grate this to order, and if you have any at all that you left over, cover it. And that's also why the kind that's in a tube is good, because the tube, when you squeeze the wasabi out of the tube, you're also squeezing out extra air. And then when you put the cap back on, you've squeezed most of the air out of there, so that helps to keep it fresher. But I will tell you that the wasabi in a tube, even if it's fresh wasabi, it will eventually start to turn brownish. Okay, you can still use it, but it's not going to have that attractiveness of freshly ground wasabi. Now let's talk about real wasabi versus faux wasabi. Now in color, real wasabi is naturally green. Faux wasabi, you're adding some kind of green food coloring. It could be a green food coloring, or it could be spinach or something else that would provide the greenness. And the color of freshly ground wasabi is vibrant. It's bright. Okay, you can see in the photo of the photo at the top where there's the shark skin grater and a piece of the wasabi root, that the wasabi looks paler in color, more vibrant green, and the faux wasabi, which you see a lump of it there at the bottom in the center, that is a duller green. It's maybe kind of more of a pastel-y green, not as bright of a green, okay? That's part of the way that you tell the difference between the two. Talk about the texture of real wasabi versus faux wasabi. So when you grate real wasabi, it's not a paste. And you might see, if you buy tubes, or you might read about wasabi in tubes, it might say that it's a paste in a tube. So you might think, oh, it's like toothpaste consistency. But if what they did is they mixed up wasabi powder and put it in a tube, then it may be more like a paste. But if they actually grated a wasabi root, and you have freshly grated wasabi in that tube, then it's not going to be a paste. It's going to be more gritty. It's going to be more grainy. Okay, kind of like if you take if you were to grate daikon, or even radish, or even carrot. It's got a grittiness to it. It's got a graininess to it. It's not a paste. Okay. Now, faux wasabi is smooth. It is a thick paste, and that's because they're taking almost always a powder, and they're mixing that with water, and it makes a paste. The taste of real versus faux wasabi. Real wasabi is very difficult to compare to anything else. It has a very clean taste. There's a spiciness there, but it's a clean spiciness. It's not an overwhelming spiciness. It's slightly sweet. Some people say it's sweet while you're eating it. Some people say there's kind of a sweetness on the finish. And the taste is much more subtle than faux wasabi. Faux wasabi is really in your face. Okay? When you eat wasabi, I used to go on these ski trips and we would have what we called the annual wasabi contest, where we put like a teaspoon of wasabi on a piece of tuna and everybody in the contest would eat it. And whoever was able to not break a sweat would win the contest. And that was difficult to do because faux wasabi is kind of overwhelming. It's powerful. It has a short-lived spiciness, but it's a powerful spiciness. With real wasabi, there's a spiciness, and it's also short-lived, but it's a much more subtle spiciness. Now that brings me to the heat, which I've already touched on. With real wasabi, the heat is mild and it's short-lived. And also it highlights the fish flavor, the sushi flavor. It doesn't mask it. Faux wasabi, it burns hotter, it burns longer, although it's still fairly short-lived burn. And too much of it overpowers the sushi flavor. So when I go to a sushi restaurant, I don't even really use wasabi because wasabi chefs, what they usually do, if you're having nigiri, which is a piece of fish on top of rice, they usually put a little bit of wasabi, brush a little bit of wasabi on the bottom of the fish and put that on top of the rice. And they've studied sushi for years and years and years, and they have a lot of experience, and they know how to balance those flavors. So they just use a small amount of it to accentuate the fish flavor, especially because they're almost always using faux wasabi. Right? So I don't add any wasabi because I find that it overpowers the fish taste. I also don't swirl wasabi into my shoyu, my soy sauce, because one, you don't do that in Japan, and two, it's not giving you these pure, clean flavors. I like the pure, clean flavor of the soy sauce, the shoyu, and then deciding whether to add any wasabi or not, which I almost never do. Now, where do you get real wasabi? And I'm talking about in the United States. You can get it in the form of a root. You can buy the roots that you can then grind yourself. You can also buy it in powder form. And here, actually, I have, here is some powder. And this came from a company called Savory Spice Shop. I got it in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it says pure wasabi powder. And it doesn't have any ingredients on it, but it says this is true wasabi, the root of an Asian plant and the Japanese version of horseradish root. And and I believe this is actually pure wasabi powder, right? So you can get it in powder form. You can also get it in tube form. It comes in a box like this, comes in a tube like this, okay? As you can see, I haven't used this for a while and it's turning a bit brown, but that is ground wasabi that was put into a tube. And this I can tell, and when I use it, I know it's more gritty, more granular. So I don't think this was powder that was mixed with water and then put into the tube. Okay, so it comes in those forms. There are also places in the United States where you can buy wasabi plants. So if you want to try to plant it and grow it, you can do that. It's up to you. So I've listed here a few places where you can buy real wasabi in one of those three forms. There's a company called Real Wasabi. I've given you all the URLs here, and Real Wasabi sells it in both root and powder form. And two other companies on this page, the Wasabi Store and Pacific Wild Pick, they also sell the root form of it. There's also a company called Matoku. Now Matoku doesn't sell the root form of it, but they sell some really good products. Like they sell a really good mirin, and they sell a good shoyu, a couple good shoyus, and they sell wasabi, real wasabi, in powder form or in tubes. Here's a few more companies. Hokkaido Uni and HMB Wasabi and Oregon Mushroom Company, they all sell the roots, right? And then there are two other places where you can get the tubes, Catalina and then Toro. Toro is a company that sells donabe, and I have a lot of donabe lessons. And donabe is basically a clay pot, and you cook things in the clay pot. And they have some great products, and they sell wasabi in tube form. Okay, so thanks for watching this video. I hope this helps you to understand the truth about wasabi. If you can, look around for it. Try real wasabi. If you're in a restaurant, you know, if it's a higher end Japanese restaurant, they may have on the menu that they have real wasabi, usually at an extra price. If not, you could ask, you know, do you have real wasabi? And they'll probably say no. But if you can find it, I urge you not only to try it, but to try it side by side with faux wasabi, so you really see the difference. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.